Welcome to Monday. Welcome to noon on Monday Eastern Time. Welcome to Live with Kevin. Glad that you are here. So glad that you're here, actually. You're going to be glad you're here as well. I'm going to introduce my guest, bring her in just a second. But before we get there, a couple of quick thoughts. First of all, it is apparently one of the least productive days of the year, with 17 million Americans estimated to be taking the day off for, what do they call it? Super Bowl fever or Super Bowl flu or something like that. That's not you, chances are, and you're here. I'm glad that you're here. And we're going to dive in just a second. But to convince you to stay, if we were going to talk about you, and if we were going to talk about your future, and if we were going to talk about the future of work, why wouldn't we want to be here? Why wouldn't we want to have that conversation? And why wouldn't we want to bring on the lovely and talented Laurie Ruettimann to join us? Laurie, welcome.
Hey, Kev, how's it going?
It's going well. And so everybody, let me introduce you to Laurie Ruettimann. She's got a brand new book. We're going to talk about that a little bit. She's a former HR leader turned writer, entrepreneur, and speaker. CNN recognized her as one of the 5 top career advisors in the U.S. So we're going to talk about your career. And her work has been featured on NPR, The New Yorker, the New York USA Today, Wall Street Journal, and Vox. She frequently delivers keynotes, I'm guessing right now from her bedroom or from her home office, at conferences and management events around the world, and hosts a popular podcast focused on fixing work, punk rock HR. She has a brand new book, Betting on You, how to put your, let's see if I can get this out here so you can see it better, everybody. There we go. Betting on You, how to put yourself first and finally take control of your career. Laurie, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you, my friend. It does not get old to see the book. It's pretty terrific. What a feeling.
It does not. That's true. We had that conversation briefly before we went live. So everybody, here's the deal. We're live for those of you that are watching now, which means you should ask your questions, which means you should make your comments, and please do those things. Now, I know that many of you will be watching later, but you can still make comments. You can still in the stream, you can make comments. I will capture those if we see them, or when we see them, we'll comment back. We'll let Laurie know, whatever. So this is meant to be live and interesting and engaging. And so Laurie, let's talk about this book. There's a lot of books. Let's just be clear. There's a lot of books about career advice and all of those things. Why should people pick up this one? What makes this one different? And we're not just going to talk about the book, everybody, but we need to start there. She's so happy to see me holding it. See, I have notes in it even. Notice that?
Wow.
So what makes this book different?
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for asking that question. You know, before I wrote the book, I did my research because I didn't want to write something that already existed that's boring. And I read over 30 career books as part of this environmental landscape. And what I realized is that career advice has not evolved, has not been disrupted since 1937, when Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich. Most career books go like this: if you want something and you think positively, you can do it. Now, having worked in human resources in a lot of different companies, I have seen a lot of different career types. And while positive thinking surely is important, it's only one small piece of the pie. And so this book really narrows in on 4 pathways to optimize your career and optimize your life, because ultimately I think we fix work by fixing ourselves.
Yeah, positive thinking is not a strategy by itself, right? So I will say something that Laurie won't say about this book is this book also has attitude. You'll be entertained. You might not always agree. That's okay. And I'm sure she doesn't mind about that. But you're going to be entertained, and you'll even hear words that I probably won't say here. Just saying, although maybe they'll come up. Who knows? But it's really fun, and it's really good. There's a lot of great stuff in it. And so I just wanted to pick a few things to sort of get the conversation going. And Laurie, we can go anywhere we want. But one of the chapters has a really great title, especially coming from someone who worked in HR for a long time. And I'm guessing, at least in part, HR organizations are some of your clients. So you say that we should be our own HR.
Yeah, I do say that. And I'm sorry to give everybody extra work. Well, one of the things I love about the world of work and working in human resources is I've seen a lot of different jobs. And one of the things I've seen working in HR since 1995 is that it's a function really born out of the fact that people don't like to do certain things. They don't like to deal with the intricacies of life. They don't want to get down and dirty with the details. They like the idea of leadership, but when it comes to the difficult moments in time, they want to outsource that to another function, preferably filled with people who are kind of like their moms and dads who can swoop in and do the dirty work. So I believe that if you live a life of integrity and you come to work and you demonstrate self-leadership, you probably won't ever need human resources. And that's what the chapter talks about, to really be proactive, to be the CEO of your life, and to do some of that work that largely falls on the shoulders of people in HR who don't even want it.
Yeah, I think that's the key word here is proactive. And it's interesting because you and I were chatting just before we went live that your book came out on the 12th of January, and our book, you can see it up there in the corner, everybody, came out on the 19th of January. And that's one of the three big ideas in our book as well, is this idea of being proactive. So if someone is with us and they're thinking, Laurie, about, okay, that idea sounds fine, being proactive. What do you mean by that in the context of our career? So like, I'm out here doing my work.
Yeah.
What do you mean by being proactive?
Well, it's one of those words that doesn't have a lot of meaning until you start to get down into the details when the rubber hits the road. So I mean that in the small moments, you practice boundary setting, you practice leadership, you test out limits, you test out conversations so that in the big moments, you can nail it. You know, a lot of times people think, oh, I can't possibly have somebody, set a boundary. I can't possibly say no. And you're right. You can't possibly say no to your CEO when you've never said no your entire life. You can't possibly stand up to terrible bullies at work if you've never had any practice. That's why you practice in the small moments to get good and to be able to do that in the bigger moments. So what I mean is showing up every day and having agency and making choices in your life that move you 1% further along in living a better life. So you're right. You can absolutely not walk into your boss's office and tell him to take that job and shove it. But when someone,
well, you can, there will be consequences that
right.
you may not want.
When someone asks you to stay late or to do a meeting when you're trying to feed your family, you can practice peer-to-peer, one-on-one, testing out a boundary and saying no, and just see how that goes. What works, what doesn't, what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel uncomfortable. And when you explore this about yourself, you're better prepared for those bigger moments that come along and test you on the job.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the idea of get 1% better is something I absolutely love. I've written about over time.
And written about it. It's like super trendy right now. I don't care if it's 1%. I don't care if it's 0.5%. But if you're not learning, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're not thriving. So you've got to make incremental change in your life because that's the point of life.
I didn't even know I was trendy. I've been writing about it for like 15 years. So
we're all trendy in our weird ways.
So Dan Vargas is here and he's in Ludington, Michigan, which is near and dear to my heart. And hello, Dan. So I forgot to do this earlier. I often will do this. If you're here, tell us where you're at, other than just saying I'm in my house, because that doesn't tell us much. And that's where a lot of people are right now. I'm glad to have you, Dan. I'm glad to have all of you here. Right. Lindsay, here's what I'm going to put Lindsay's comment up here, Laurie, and let you just comment on it. Here it is.
I have to get my reading glasses out.
Oh, so. I'll read. With choices, Lindsay says, with choices come consequences. Mm-hmm. So anything you want to say about, we're both nodding. Anything you want to say about that? Of
course. A lot of people feel as if they don't have a choice at work. And this is something that's a big theme throughout my book. And oftentimes we make those assumptions without testing out whether or not they're true. So in the book, I teach something called a pre-mortem, which is just negative projection, negative thinking, to really figure out what's the worst that can happen. If everything failed and my worst nightmares came true, what would that look like? And you go through that list. You've made a choice to tell your boss that you can't work late. How would that manifest? And you look at that list and you say, is this true? And if it's true, how can I mitigate it beforehand before I actually say no? This is an old Stoic exercise that's since been used by Cisco, NASA, IBM to really project worst case scenarios and mitigate them so that the world doesn't fall apart. And if it's good enough for NASA and Cisco, it's good enough for a little career management.
And the other thing I would say about that, absolutely. And by the way, I was planning to bring that up, so you beat me to it. That's why I have the fancy little thing down here. But the other thing I would say about that is it does all of those things, but it also sometimes when we do that, we look at it and say, well, it's not nearly as bad as we thought it was going to be, which is very valuable because so often we're worried about stuff that we shouldn't have even been worried about.
That's right. That's right. So let's take a step back and talk about that premortem, because the premortem can be anything that you're about to do, from remodeling your kitchen to having a very difficult conversation with your boss. All you need to do is ask yourself, how is this going to fail? And let that story go in your head of how you're going to screw up that job interview or screw up that performance discussion with someone who reports to you. Get it all down. But, I would recommend setting a timer for about a minute to contain the exercise. And then when you look at that list, if you address that list of what could go wrong, you automatically, if you start to act on it, improve your chance of success by over 30%. Now, the key here in two ways is to do this before you do the activity, because a post-mortem is often pointless. You look and see what just went wrong, what you did, and you never make a plan to fix it going forward, because we're all optimists in the moment when we start something new. So the key is to do this before you do the activity. The other thing is to make sure you contain it for about a minute, because you don't want to spiral in negative thinking. You want to give yourself just a little bit of space to write down all the worst case scenarios, but then stop, because after a minute, you got it. You get the gist of this exercise. So that's my advice for the premortem, but it's an effective tool for career management as well as relationship management.
So if we were buying a product and I said, listen, if in 1 minute, you could do something in 1 minute that would make you 30% more likely to be successful at something difficult, would you buy it? The answer is yes. And
no,
she just gave it to you.
The answer is no. I tried to create this product, and most people without a Sherpa, without a guide, without a human face on it, are still too afraid to do this exercise. That's what I learned by trying to turn this idea into a product. And so I'm giving it to you with my soft, gentle approach, telling you it's going to be okay. And as a consulting tool, this has been one of my most effective tools with leaders, with managers, and with HR organizations. They love the premortem when you can lead them through this exercise.
Right. I do it with coaching clients all the time. I did it once this morning, as it turns out. So there are a bunch of stuff in the book, and there are chapters we won't get to in the time that we have. Anyone who knows me will not be surprised that I honed in on the chapter where you talk about the premortem, which is in the chapter about learning. So I'd like for you just to talk about your thoughts about our own learning. I have 3 or 4 things I want us to talk about there, but just open season. What are your thoughts for us if we're going to bet on ourselves and our careers and our futures and our success? What should we be thinking about around learning?
Great question. So much of our learning is focused on who we are in our roles today and where we're going to go in the next 18 months. And that's fine from a corporate standpoint. Does and does not make sense in some ways. But I want you to think about learning as the keystone of happiness, of engagement, because science, research have all borne this out. The happiest people in the world, the people who are really working at that intersection of purpose and passion, are learning. And they're not just learning about their jobs, their roles, but they're learning about the world. So if there's something you're innately curious about that has nothing to do with work, put it on your calendar, go to the University of YouTube and check it out. Like, learning is available to us all. Certifications and degrees cost money, but learning and lifelong learning is something that you can do and do for yourself with little to no cost. So that's where I would begin the conversation, Kevin.
Hey, one of mine right now, and if anyone who reads my blog will know this, one of the things I'm learning about right now is smoking and curing my own bacon. I've been doing it for about 6 months now, and it is the yummiest learning of all, at least for me. So there you have it. Lots of learning going on there, and I love the University of YouTube. I'll tell you something else, everybody, that maybe you don't know, and that is, depending, especially if we're thinking about something like habits or like hobbies or anything that's very thematic. Chances are there's a group on Facebook.
Oh.
Or there's a group on YouTube.
Yeah.
On YouTube, but also on LinkedIn here.
Sure.
We're on all 3 of those places right now. But I have found a group on on Facebook for a couple things that I'm really interested in
Yeah.
that I don't really participate a lot, but I'm learning a lot by listening. And then you get well, I agree with that. I don't agree with that. You get all of this richness that you won't even always get in a book, from someone.
Smart.
Right? Really,
Well,
really.
I'm currently, I'm very passionate about animals, and I'm an old cat foster, but I'm now a new dog foster. I've had two since writing this book. And what I don't know about dogs is pretty amazing, but the world is so informative and so helpful. So not only am I learning about what it takes to be an effective dog foster, like training, nurturing, all the good stuff, but I'm also making wonderful relationships in the process. And it gives me an opportunity to learn some good stuff about leadership, about all these things that I'm not overtly trying to learn, and then bring that back to my work life. And so this is one of the principles in my book, that if you invest in the personal, you elevate the professional. So many of us are walking around with underdeveloped personal lives. We don't have good relationships. We don't have good friendships. And that makes sense. We're in COVID, right? It's very hard to connect. But these things that we do for ourselves, these connections that we make, even online, can pay dividends in our career. And if you give me a high performer at work, that person, if they're truly a high performer all around, has a wonderful, robust, rich personal life. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I'll take that. I mean, I won't say that I'll take it further, but I'll take it to a slightly different place. And that is that when we're learning in other areas, we're better learners. And
Yes.
so as I'm learning about bacon, like I'm being a better learner about something else. And so it's a skill in and of itself, and it's a habit in and of itself. And so we're gaining in those.
We are kindred spirits here, Kevin.
Speaking of kindred spirits, there's something else that you talk about in the book briefly. I try to find things to do things. Number one, to prove to you that I read the book, and number two, to pull out things that maybe in other conversations you had with folks they didn't bring up. But you talk about something here that I've been a fan of, and I don't think you call it this, but you'll know what I mean when I say it. That we can't have at a distance mentors.
Yes.
We can even have dead mentors if you want to go that far. So talk to us about this idea. If you want to tell the story that it connects to in the book, that's fine. But just talk to us about this idea, because so many people are, especially now in COVID, well, I can't, I had a mentor at work and, they're not around. I can't see them now or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But
right.
What does this mean and how do we do it?
Well, I love that you're passionate about mentorship, because this has been the single biggest differentiator in my career, really connecting with smart people who know what they're doing and asking questions. But also, if I can't ask them questions, because that's true, we can have mentors who are not connected to us. I just follow them and I mimic the good stuff and I throw away the stuff I don't like. And in the book, I have a whole bunch of stories around mentorship, but in my own life, I followed a journalist by the name of Susie Welch, and she is the wife of Jack Welch, the former, CEO of GE. And I love her stuff. It was really moving. And so I write about this in the book, how I'm motivated by Susie Welch, but I've never been able to make a connection with her. Well, I thought after I wrote the book, I should probably tell her she's in the book. And so I sent her a note on LinkedIn. I'm like, one more time, I just want to connect with you. Still an admirer, love your good stuff, always learn from you. And by the way, I write about you in the book. And she wrote back and went, oh my God, I never saw any of your messages, because she's human, right? But please send me a copy of the book. And she loved it so much, she endorsed it. So there you go. You never know why people don't respond, but you should always reach out to someone you admire, someone who motivates you. And if you don't hear back, don't take it personally. Keep learning from them, even if it's at a distance.
So I want to say two things about that. And the first one is, you said something, I want to go back to everyone who's listening live. You can't go back and hit and rewind, but if you're watching later, you can. Laurie said something super important. She didn't see the other messages because she's
busy.
Human.
She's human.
And I'm not saying what Laurie was thinking, but it would be easy for us to think, well, that person, they're too big. They're never going to reach out to me. They didn't really care. Like, we could create a very negative story.
Absolutely.
When at a minimum, we should just, as my good friend and co-author Guy Harris says, just assume benign intent.
Yes.
Now, I love to assume a positive intent, but in that case, just assume benign intent. Like, she didn't see it, 100 other things. Who knows how many people are messaging her, and on and on. And then, good things will happen. And as someone who is, Laurie and I both are people that people have read our work. They know who we are, and they might not want to reach out to us
Please
for
do.
the same reasons. Two things. Number one, if you did and I didn't see your message. And number two, you're not out anything. You're not out anything.
For sure. For sure. I love that this is the theme of taking a risk and betting on yourself, because if you really want to go somewhere in this world, you have a vision of who you are, or you don't, but you know that the status quo is untenable. Go find people who are living the life you want and learn from them. Now, I also talk about in the book real traditional mentorship relationships.
Absolutely.
There was a woman who I worked with at a company, just a small, tiny company called Pfizer. Nobody's ever heard of, right? So she was a young woman, a millennial in a leadership role, and she was not thriving in that role, but really had nobody to look up to in the IT department. And she made a mistake, and people really called her out for the mistake without a lot of solutions. And I intervened, trying to be the great HR lady that I was, and said, I'm going to find this woman a mentor. And I did. And it turns out after 6 months, not only was this millennial manager okay, she was thriving because she had made a connection, she was vulnerable, and she understood that there were different ways to work. And so a mentor can not only just shake you out of your, broken way of working. They can not only just save your job, but they can truly change the trajectory of your career. So if you don't have a mentor, it doesn't have to be super formal. It can be informal, but a good mentor will mentor you for about a year. And if they're great, they will turn into a friend. That's what I believe.
And here's the thing, everybody. Having been a mentor many times, I can tell you that often the mentor gets as much as the mentee. And so while you might be hesitant to ask, and I understand that, and that's okay, realize that, and you are asking of someone of their time, which is their most valuable resource, but realize that quite honestly, it might be as valuable for them as it is for you.
Kevin, I would love to hear in the comments, and I will peek back into the video later on as well. Who are some dream mentors for people out there? Like if you could just ask anybody to be your mentor, Warren Buffett, Melinda Gates, I don't know, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who would your mentor be? I want to know that. And I want to know, are you brave enough to reach out to that person? That'd be great.
And it's excellent. And I will go back and say, I said at the start of this, they can even be dead. And to me, when I read a biography or an autobiography, that's largely why I'm reading it. Right? I'm reading it for what can I learn from that person?
Yes.
And so right now I'm reading, and I cannot tell you the author's name, but the book is called Barnum. It's about P.T. Barnum. And you get 5 pages in and you already know stuff you didn't know before, but as a person who cares about marketing and a variety of things and American history from that time period, like I was interested in this book. I was in Half Price Books. I got to have this book. I can't go into Half Price Books and not leave with books. I dropped off 13, Laurie, and I owned 3. So that's good. But the point is that you can read biographies with that lens if you want. And those folks can become that very thing.
Super good advice.
So, all right. So, let's see. What else do we have to talk about? I know what I want us to talk about.
Yes.
One of the wisest questions that I was asked after one of my books was written, and Laurie, you've been through this process, just finished it. You're right. You write the book, and then there's this window of time, and then the book comes out.
Yes.
And so a wise person asked me once, okay, Kevin, what did you learn after you wrote it, but before it came out? So so I'll put, that's the question. What have you learned since you wrote the book? Framed in, what do you kind of now wish was in it?
Oh, that's such a fun question. For years I had this mantra that team building is for suckers, and it is. I mean, team building's largely garbage. But as I wrote the book, I realized that, and you know these things, but you don't know them. No woman is an island. And although I had always surrounded myself with really good people, I had developed a lot of transactional relationships. That's what a solo entrepreneur does. And throughout the process of writing this book, I really learned the value of high functioning teams and how they connect on an individual level with people who are important. So I would write more about teams in this book if I could. healthy teams, what makes a team healthy, and also what makes a team dysfunctional, and why I still kind of believe team building is for suckers. But I'm really grateful for all the teams that came together to move this book from an idea to actual execution. So I would write more about that.
There's a big difference between an exercise that's meant to build a team and having a highly effective team. Those are two different things, right? So, okay, we probably can't talk about career advancement, career growth without a conversation about job search, right?
Sure.
Or what do I do? I think it's the last chapter in the book. And so my question would be this. So we'll frame it in the current situation, right?
Sure.
During the COVID, right? During a pandemic, however you want to say it, like it's different now than it was a year ago. We're still not to a year since we all went into our houses. So what advice do you have for people that are thinking about their future? You may not be searching right now. Maybe you are searching right now. What's your advice if you're searching right now? What's your advice in general about how that's different than what people might have in their heads?
Well, the COVID certainly makes it complicated. We can no longer go to those awkward networking meetings where we'd eat those soggy risotto balls and bad veggies and drink some crappy wine and try to pretend like we're interested in other people's careers. And frankly, it's gone for good, and I'm grateful for that. I think one of the challenges right now is that everybody's scared. And so even if we are looking for work, we're scared to let go of what we have because we don't exactly know what we're going to get into. So in the book, I talk a lot about beginning with the end in mind. And if you know who you are, you know what you believe in, you know what you're willing to put up with, you could really endure anything. So I would ask you, do you really need to leave this job? Or is it going to be you're going to get this new job and you're going to be on this hedonistic treadmill and suffer from what we call arrival fallacy, where you get there and you're like, is that all there is? And it's like, yeah, dude, that's all there is because that's all you are. So
this is no different than the last one, right?
Right. So make sure when you do this job search that you're focused on the parallel activities of your own well-being, because your own well-being is what's going to guarantee that no matter what you get served up at your job, you can not only survive, but you can thrive. So I'm going to pause there, Kev, because it looks like you have something to say, but that well-being aspect for your job search, they go hand in hand. And if you don't have time for your well-being right now, maybe don't focus on the job search. Take the time you would use for your job search and do that for your well-being.
All I was going to say is if you've gone to 3 jobs in a row and you're looking for the next one, it's probably not the job. You need to look in the mirror. That's all I was going to say.
That's right. Well, and I think looking in the mirror is really important. A lot of people are also living with toxic environments because they think they have to. And I write in the book about my mentor, Bob Sutton, who's a professor at Stanford. And he wrote a book about toxic work environments. And he will tell you that if you're in a toxic work environment, you may not be able to leave today, but you should leave because you are never going to change it. Everybody there who's complicit had a first day at work where they made a choice to stick it out and become more like the environment than to change it. So your best bet is to move on. And I'm sorry, you can hear the FedEx guy maybe knocking at my door. I apologize for that.
It is fine, right? We all need to grant each other grace.
That's right. Hey, buddy. So anyway.
She knows her FedEx person.
I do. Well, my FedEx guy's a nice guy.
All right. So before we start to wrap up, and if anyone that's here live has a question, feel free. We'll take it still. But I just want to ask you one other thing. Sure. As a former HR person and as a person that works with organizations around the world, what do you see in the future? What do you think? How's work going to look different from your perspective moving forward than it does right now?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of different workforces that are happening. So we do have this elite workforce in the technology industry where, it could be super slick and everybody's working from home and, it's AI, machine powered algorithms, blah, blah, blah. But then we have the real world of work where people are stuck in hierarchies. Powerful people are still in charge and butts and seats still matter. So I want to be real careful that when we talk about the world of work, we try to address both ends, the aspirational, where everybody is working off of a tablet and wearing slick tailored clothes and working from home and drinking lattes.
No one is wearing slick clothes anymore. They're all wearing their pajamas. Let's be clear about that.
are some people still wearing tailored clothes. I don't understand those people, but not me. Not in the middle of America. They're not.
Oh,
So.
hey, listen, a person on my team who has another job, works for us some and has another job.
Yeah.
He was interviewing someone on Zoom for a job. He stood up, he had on gym shorts, and she said, "Nope, not hiring this guy." And I don't blame her. I wouldn't either.
Little dull there. You're not making good decisions. At least stay seated. But yeah, so I think, I'm a little worried about some of the conversations that I hear CEOs having, because for all the talk of empathy and compassion and working from home, they're anxious to get people back to work because they still don't trust the productivity of certain workers. And so there's this real human tendency to be suspicious of what other people are doing. And when that's in power, that's dangerous. And I still see that happening. So there's also commercial real estate that's being unfulfilled. There are cities that are not thriving because we're not at work. So this idea that we're all going to be working at home forever is a lie. And we need to talk about that.
So there's a question that came in, and I will not make you get your glasses. I promise.
Thank you.
And really the question is about, is there going to be a difference in not-for-profits or for-profits? I mean, you were just talking about your view of that future.
Yeah.
Do you see any differences in the not-for-profit world or the for-profit world? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I do actually. I think not-for-profits have been historically overworked and under-resourced for decades. And I fear that that's going to continue. We talk about this amazing unleashing of the economy that's going to happen when the vaccines come. And maybe that's true for, retail, hospitality, even technology. But not-for-profits have gotten really good at doing more with less. And I'm just worried about that trend. So it's up to us as self-leaders to be real clear, talented self-leaders, to start saying, I need more. I need to do things differently. I need a different way. And to march with your feet if you're not happy at that not-for-profit and you're not getting the resources you need to be good at that job.
So I've put up this lovely website at the bottom of the page. So you can go there, laurieruettimann.com, to get information about Laurie, what she's up to. Anything that you want to point people to specifically there, or anything else about the book that you want to say, or where people can find it, etc.
Well, I'm so grateful to publish a book during a pandemic and insurrection, all of the economic contraction. So I've written the book to be of service to people. There are no 2x2 quadrants. We tried to keep bullet points out of it. It's just good old-fashioned storytelling to help people really prompt ideas within themselves. So it can be a quick read. And it was meant to be a quick read in a commute, by a pool, all the stuff we used to do. Or you can slow it down and ask yourself, why do I agree with this? Or why do I disagree with this? Is a more interesting question. And learn and grow a little bit. That's the service I want to provide.
Laurie Ruettimann, everyone. It is Monday at noon. Well, it's not noon now, but we started at Monday at noon, and we'll do that every single Monday. Some weeks we'll do something different. Some weeks it'll just be me, but most weeks I'll have a guest. My guest next week you're going to love. It's someone I promise you probably don't know, but you're going to love him. And so please join us next week. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You'll have to wait and watch to find out. Oh, I can tell you. It's Darren Gray. Darren Gray is phenomenal. He's worked with many professional athletes, especially in the NFL. Worked with Tony Dungy extensively. He's phenomenal. He's going to be with us next week. A tremendous leader in his own right. That's our conversation. This week it's been with Laurie Ruettimann. Laurie, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, and everybody be safe out there.
Thanks everybody for being here. And we'll be back next week again, right here. And we'll see you all then. Until then, have a great week and be remarkable, everybody.
Bye.